taking the time sticking through Friday. We have a fantastic panel here, really timely and critical, important topic we're going to cover around the role of partnerships and collaboration and the future of digital infrastructure and AI and how critical those partnerships are for our success. I'm Lynn Smellin, SVP of Strategic Pursuits at Oracle, and your moderator today, and I'm thrilled to moderate this incredible panel of distinguished experts from across our industry. Before we get started, let's take a couple minutes and meet our panelists. With me here today, I have Raj Mirpuri from NVIDIA. I have Mohammed Nazar from Telecom Egypt. Obina Iziadinso.
Yes.
Got it. It's Italian, right?
Yep.
From the IFC, and Ignacio Quintana from MGX. I'd like to invite each of you to just take a moment and briefly introduce yourselves and maybe share a quick thought on why you believe that partnerships are critical in our new world ahead. Obina, would you kick us off?
Absolutely, and thanks, Lynn, and good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Obina Iziadinso. I'm the global sector lead for data center investments for the IFC. The IFC, the International Finance Corporation, we are the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, and so we focus on investing in private sector companies and infrastructure projects in emerging markets globally. We've been investing in data centers now since 2005. We started off as an equity investor in retail enterprise data center projects in frontier emerging markets. And in 2020, we expanded our strategy to become both a lender and an investor in wholesale hyperscale data center companies and projects in emerging markets globally. I would say, just in terms of the importance of partnerships, one of the lessons learned that we as the IFC have had from investing in digital infrastructure for the past 25 years and data centers is, partnerships are really important in terms of being able to mitigate the risks associated with expanding into new markets. There's a various number of, whether it's macro risks, execution-related risks, market risks that are involved in emerging markets globally. But being able to develop partnerships, whether it's with development finance institutions like the IFC and others, private sector firms, government actors, really does help to provide the tools and the frameworks that are necessary to mitigate the risks when entering into and expanding in various emerging markets. And so I think that's one of the key takeaways for us in terms of the importance of developing partnerships.
Managing risks, balancing risks, absolutely. Thank you for that. Raj.
Hello, Lynn.
Hello.
Thanks for inviting me. I'd also like to thank Bill Barney, all our partners, Ignacio, Mohammed, Obina. Thanks for joining me on the panel. I manage our cloud sales for what we call our NVIDIA Cloud Partners, and I really appreciate being out here. I've been at NVIDIA for 20-some years, lucky to be there, and we're so excited. I know that a lot of speakers this morning mentioned the advent of AI, generative AI around the world, and driving, sort of working across the board on trying to find power. And that got me thinking, so what are our 4 pillars to engage in how to continue to grow this generative AI market? And so the 4 pillars always rest on, first, do you have a powered land shell? So we get our cloud partners come to us, say, we want to go stand up this infrastructure. The first question that always is, do you have a powered land shell, right? And then when is it going to be ready? Where is it? Let's understand what that is. The second part of that, of course, is, to Obina's point, the financing, right? It's super important. You have to make sure that whether it's debt or some sort of equity, some other investment vehicle that company is leveraged, that they're set. And at that point, we start talking about the compute itself. And it's taken us a while to sort of build out this completely well-balanced reference architecture. And it's our enterprise reference architectures for our GPUs, our compute platform, our networking, and of course, we test a whole bunch of storage partners, make sure that that's ready. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is work with our partners to stand up an AI factory that's highly performant, that's going to deliver incredible amounts of throughput so that you're focused on taking the electricity and data that comes in and produce intelligence measured in dollars per million, millions of tokens. And that's the one fundamental difference between an AI factory and a traditional data center, is the fact that you're producing intelligence, that you're leveraging all of this amazing reference architectures that we work with all of our partners, including Lynn's company, to stand up and serve all the ever-growing compute needs. There hasn't been a time where one of our partners has stood up an AI factory and it has been consumed. In fact, we consistently see that demand far outstrips supply in the market for an AI factory. But AI factories are not for the faint-hearted, right? It takes a fair amount of planning and investment. And so we spend a lot of time with our partners making sure that that's in, and then also understanding who your off-takers are. And that is a critical part of this. Off-take is the most important part of an AI factory. And we know whether it's coming from an AI native, whether it's coming from a well-funded startup, whether it's coming from sovereign AI, or whether it's coming from enterprise or ISV partners. So with the right offtake, you can build the right AI factory, have the right AI flywheel to go drive consumption, which allows you to build more AI factories as long as the powered land shells are ready. So back to Lynn's question about partnerships. We want to make sure that this AI factory is completely democratized around the world. It's important for us to work with governments around the world to de-risk some of these investments. It is important that we show them the path that keeping your culture, keeping your data within the boundaries of a country is a great thing. Don't outsource that. Make sure that you're supporting local industries by making a token investment in some cases. You don't have to be, all you have to do is be an anchor tenant, because that's how you sort of help stand up and spur investments. There's plenty of power around the world, but a lot of our partners are waiting for that signal from their particular government or regional authorities to help spur this investments. There's plenty of mission-critical citizen services that can be deployed on these AI factories. So our job is to make sure, we're a fabless company and we're a cloudless company, but we love putting partnerships together, expanding the ecosystem, make sure that the ecosystem continues to grow, and all of you continue to benefit from this ecosystem. And that's when you have a robust ecosystem where partners are being added every day and there's great growth opportunities, the investments will continue. And no one company can do it, so we really appreciate, first of all, opportunity to talk to you guys, but also more importantly, work with all of you and sort of welcoming us to your ecosystem. So thank you.
That's excellent. And I would say, before we go over to Mohammed, is one of the things I've observed is NVIDIA's richness in creating that ecosystem and bringing us all together, and the deep investment that you make in bringing those collaborative relationships together, for sure, and we'll talk about that. Mohammed, I'd love to hear your introduction and perspective as well.
Thank you, Ryan, and thanks to having me here with this great panel and to meet a lot of industry colleagues. I think we are in the telco business, so it's all about interconnection and connecting people, which means partnership towards the end. And I think since the starting point of internet, without partnerships, we couldn't reach this point today. We live on partnerships between providers, carriers, interconnecting together globally, and partnership with suppliers to give us the technology that's needed to develop a service to our customer base. And it's all interconnected together. And for me, new technology, new demand means people and eyeballs need to be connected to this technology, and they need to use the service, which will create the demand. So in Telecom Egypt, we have maybe a different position from other telco provider, because we provide telco service and the infrastructure for the domestic market, serving more than 100 million of population. At the same time, we carry the traffic from Southeast Asia and from Africa to Europe, interconnecting data centers together, and all we see is a growth in the massive growth. So now we are talking about more than 250 terabit per second between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. It's mainly the traffic coming from the evolving and the growth in the technology and moving from content-based to AI workloads, and which we expect it to be growing massively over the next few years. Partnership is a key element in this successful growth over years, because governments are needed for a lot of things. One of them is permits for projects, availability of clarity on the regulations, because deploying capital and giving confidence for the capital market to invest in projects without clarity on the regulations will be slowing the project and the development. I think this is a very important item to look into the growth of AI, about how to give confidence to the capital market to invest in certain markets. That's why the partnership and the government involvement and the open discussion and the clarity is very important in this partnership. The other thing is, as a telco provider, data center, we invest in data centers, but we understand that we cannot continue to deploy in the same speed of data center developers. That's why partnership with data center developers is very important for us, because we need to invest in fiber networks, we need to grow the transport, we need to invest in the access network, also in the mobile broadband. We cannot do all of this and at the same time grow in data center and deliver what's needed, which means that we need to have a partnership, and successful partnership, to attract investors and capital market to deploy in data centers, so that it allows us to offer more services to our customers. Again, without partnership, either with government or with different industry and ecosystem players, chip makers also need to have the support from governments to give them clarity on what is the plan for this market, so that they can envisage what's needed and to do that, to be done. So without all of this together, we don't see clarity on the growth. That's why partnership is very critical to keep us and reach, after 10 years, what we have seen that we reached now from 10 years back.
Right. And quite a bit of experience, right? Telcos have always had, that's been a nature from the beginning of time, is interconnect, relationships, collaboration. So, to your point, it's a significant extension on a culture that's been natural for telecoms for decades. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. Last but definitely not least, Ignacio, would love your perspective.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. And thanks for sticking around till the end. Thanks, Lynn and Bill, for the invitation. And I'm happy to be here with you guys. It wasn't difficult for me to get here. I live in DC, even though our offices are in New York and Abu Dhabi, so it was relatively easy on a Friday. I'm Ignacio Quintana. I work at MGX, which is a relatively new organization that was set up about a year ago, last summer, stemming out of the UAE. So you could think of MGX as the UAE's national effort when it comes to investing in all things artificial intelligence. Before MGX, there were different organizations in the UAE, different funds, different folks. When it comes to investing, it's sort of coming now all under MGX. And when we say artificial intelligence, we focus only on three things: semiconductors, data center infrastructure, and the AI-enabled technology and software. That's all we do. So we don't do roads, we don't do traditional energy, we don't do satellites. We focus on those three things. I think to your question, so I'll try to be brief, Lynn, partnerships. I'll just say two things, right? I think it's obvious that with the complexity of these projects, I'm a trained engineer, right? So nobody can do this alone. I mean, it's just too complex. Nobody knows everything. So you're by default or by design almost forced to partner. And the other thing I'd say is that in MGX, we love to partner. It's part of our DNA. It's actually one of our core values to partner. So kind of please approach me or reach out, because we love to partner. It's one of our best ways of doing business, and we love to work with the best out there. To give you some examples, that we've done in the last 12 months or so of partnership, we have a sort of global partnership, quite focused on the US at the moment, called AI partnership with Microsoft, BlackRock, NVIDIA, and xAI came along as well. So that's quite focused on data center infrastructure. We also have a partnership in France with the Sovereign Wealth Fund of France, BPI, as well as Mistral, one of the large LLMs in Europe, and NVIDIA again. And then a third one could be the so-called Stargate project, which we were part of at the very inception with SoftBank and OpenAI and Oracle and others. So again, it's one of our preferred ways of working is to partner. So here we are for how we can help.
Thank you, Ignacio. And that's such a great set of examples, both domestic here in the US, but more importantly, globally, about how you have everybody from the finance and energy, technology, platforms, cloud platforms, data centers, enablement from public and private funding, governments, et cetera, all coming together in a very complex group to solve even more complicated and complex solutions. Why don't we go ahead? I'd love to do some digging into a couple more points. So maybe, Raj, I'd love for you to start us out here. What are your thoughts on how strategic partnerships, including PPPs and international collaborations, as we just heard about, some of the ones that you're deep with, Telecom Egypt, for example, across the sectors, including cloud platform, capital, digital infrastructure, how are they really accelerating? Are they accelerating? How are they accelerating what we're doing? How should we be thinking about doing it even better as we look forward?
Yeah. So we're working across the globe on helping, foster these relationships. As Ignacio said, we're engaged with them. We're engaged with a bunch of partners. And part of that is putting the teams together to go execute at a data center scale, AI factory scale, is not simple. And really, at the end of the day, the AI natives, the startups, research, the developers around the world, they're absolutely looking for compute platforms. They're absolutely looking for access to these compute platforms. And, if you think about it, a majority of the startups in the world are either in the US or China. But there's plenty of startups around the world, Israel, in Africa, in Asia, in South America. We want to make sure that generative AI is democratized around the world. We want to make sure that we're working across the globe with all of our partners, our cloud partners, not just the hyperscalers, but also around cloud partners. And that's why we have about 160, what we call the neo clouds or regional clouds, as part of our partnership program. So they surface these opportunity to us. And the question is, who else can you bring to this partnership? Is there some potential for some government funding? Is there potential for some other private partnership? Could be a telco, right? It could be, we've had opportunities in Canada and in Singapore and in Indonesia where the telcos got involved, and that helped sort of get that opportunity going. And so our job is to make sure that there's an offtake from some of these partnerships. But really, at the end of the day, de-risking the investment makes it easy for these deployments to happen. Listen, the pace of innovation with generative AI is incredible. If you look at it, if you look at a traditional data center, it's been around for 70 years. We're talking, 1% cost reduction over the last 70 years per year. And if you look at an AI factory, within 1 year, the perf per watt or the tokens per year is reduced by 90%. What that means is the compute platforms are helping reduce the cost of producing intelligence by almost 90% year over year. And that, if you think about that and think about how much data is around the world that's untapped to go build the world's intelligence, some of them is sitting within the reservoirs of local governments and regions. It makes sense for us to go build these collaborations. You could build local, but really you want to scale global, right? So you want to build local, scale global. You help spur investments within your country and bring investments from outside. Keep your data there, because data and intelligence is king today. And so as we think about this, what is the missing components of this? And for sure, making sure all of the ISVs, the key folks that build the applications, are standing up AI fully integrated within their application. So we start by saying there's 4 steps to this. First, are the applications accelerated? Not just the big ones, but the ones that you care about in your country, in your region. 2, if this accelerated, please integrate our tech, because we're building a platform that's completely scalable. It's completely, and our software is all open source. And so once you build a platform, you could train in one place where the data exists, but you can deploy anywhere because it's the same reference platform throughout the globe. So you build it once and you never have to rebuild it again. It's just, sort of extends. It's forward and backward compatible. So now that you've done that, you've got the second part of which is fully integrating the tech. And then we spend a lot of time then on your first bowl of soup, your first lighthouse accounts. Can we work with you to get the Gen AI built? And Gen AI is not, it's getting easier to build. And initially a lot of POCs around the world that didn't lead to success. But when a well thought out project is done, are we sure that the integrators are in place? Are we sure the right agents are being built? Are you focused on the right workloads that matter for your business, that'll drive productivity, rather than just doing a POC to do a POCs? And when we have done that, when we've gotten involved with that first bowl of soup across some lighthouse accounts, we've seen immediate benefits, massive productivity benefits. And the last part of that is, at this point, then the partner ecosystem can run with it. And so if you think about it, accelerate, integrate, lighthouse account engagement, and then sell. So we do this through our partnerships and include all the local partners in there. This will be successful. We've seen this in UK, we've seen this in France, we've seen this in Asia Pac. We're starting to see this in other parts of the world now. So this is a super exciting time, and I'd love to hear feedback from some of you too on how these partnerships, how do you think that from a generative AI perspective, what are you seeing also in finding the right partnerships, but also making sure that the right targets, as well as thinking of the outcomes first and try to solve that back.
Yeah, I would just add a few points here to Raj's points. I think one is that from a capital perspective, the size of the projects that we're seeing in the data center space is increasing, and just given the demand that we're seeing with generative AI, it's leading to much larger demands in terms of the data center infrastructure. So we're hearing, for example, that the needs in terms of this sort of first wave of AI infrastructure will be in the range of potentially 30 to 50 gigawatts. And that's the size of the AI infrastructure that will need to be invested in and deployed globally over the next 5 to 10 years. And so, no one hyperscaler, no one operator will be able to, significantly invest alone. And so there's a need to develop partnerships to raise that capital to invest in this infrastructure. And so we're seeing different types of partnerships, whether it's hyperscalers and private equity firms. Ignacio and Raj mentioned the joint venture that they have. Stargate and Oracle also have a similar joint venture. So that is definitely one of the ways that we are seeing that these partnerships are being put together to be able to raise and deploy the significant amounts of capital that will be needed to develop this infrastructure that can support demand for generative AI. The other thing I will say is that in terms of public-private partnerships, these vehicles are being used to de-risk these projects as well. So, for example, in the U.S., we're familiar with the current administration has identified land for the development of AI infrastructure through the White House Action Plan. If you look at, for example, in Brazil, the government there has set aside infrastructure, whether it's land, and they're creating AI cities in Rio and other parts of Brazil. Singapore also has a national AI action plan. So we are seeing that governments around the world are looking to find ways that they can de-risk AI infrastructure projects, whether it's by identifying locations or essentially finding ways to provide power to these projects at large scale so that the private sector can come in and invest and start to develop these projects over time. The last thing I will say in this area would be we are also seeing that there are a number of cross-sector partnerships that are being developed, whether it's chip manufacturers partnering with hyperscalers, partnering with private equity firms or investors. But this sort of cross-sector partnerships is also another way that we're seeing that the supply chain bottlenecks are being addressed. Because when you're bringing together different players from across the value chain, then there's this ability to potentially, reduce the lead time to obtain the inputs for these projects. 4 years ago, when we first became a lender to hyperscale data centers in Brazil and in Mexico, we were seeing it was taking 12 to 18 months to develop a new data center project. Today, now we're seeing it's taking 24 to 48 months to develop new greenfield data center projects. And so putting together these cross-sector partnerships is one way that we see that the industry is looking to help to reduce the lead time to bring this infrastructure into the marketplace.
That's really great. So shared capital risk, right? That's a share of the capital risk is significant. And then supply chain, addressing supply chain risk. Mohammed, you have deep experience with this, both on the subsea projects that you're collaborating on, as well as the cloud, sovereign cloud partnership with NVIDIA. What are your thoughts about that in terms of the financial, the operational, the supply chain elements?
I think I want to touch on a point which related to the members of all those partnerships. We need to have a common expectations on outcomes. Because when it comes to government, I used to work for government for a few years before Telecom Egypt. And what I have seen, this misalignment between the expectation of government on, normally they will look for 3-4 years quick wins. And for capital markets, especially on data centers for AI, we're talking about the future and a recycling of capital, which might take longer period. So they want to see something genuine come to the population, and because they are looking, government normally look for as a politician rather than as a business. So they want to serve the citizens, and they want to see something which is really fruition of effort. And this misalignment sometimes cause that we go in a vicious circles of long discussions between the different members of the ecosystem, and we don't reach something. That's why it's very important that we have an open discussion about what is the expectation. So we're talking about government expects something to serve the citizens, which is the customer for the government, and at the same time, they need to attract the investment to these markets. I think it's very important to align the efforts, and I think everyone needs to discuss. As a telco, I need also to see what it takes for me to be part of this business, and at the same time, what is the return on capital if I deploy more in the network and the transport to serve AI workloads. Because for me, it's a video which is, it's content or it's a video generated by AI. For me, it's consumption of a traffic which it's still paid based on the traffic consumption. So I pay for the spectrum, and the spectrum is being utilized to serve AI workloads or content on YouTube. For me, it will not make a difference. That's why either I need to see a different partnership to create additional verticals, and that's why telco need to be incentivized by having part of this business, or they will be a bottleneck for the development of innovation in AI, because towards the end, all what we're doing here is to deliver a service for one of two, either enterprise or consumer. So if the consumer is not connected to this, or enterprise is not connected to this, all these efforts will end up with a model which is in data centers, which is not utilized, and everything might collapse if the end users are not using this. How they can use it, it's a very important part which I didn't see a lot of discussion about it. And if the government will support, they will ask, why should we support? Will telco invest? And the return on capital for telco and for data centers need to be compared so that we can attract the capital for that transport, or might not find the capital needed to deploy access network. So all of this, I think, need to be addressed carefully.
Really good point about balancing, knowing those shared outcomes, knowing what are priorities across public and private, knowing how you balance that towards outcomes, but being aware of, as you said, ultimately the consumption and use at the end user level. Where do we see that going? Ignacio, I'd love your perspective on balancing just that, the challenges. You talked about culture within MGX and how partnership and collaboration are so critical and part of your DNA. Maybe speak to a little bit and share how you guys are aligning public priorities with private sector outcomes and expectations, and how do you create that culture of agility, moving quickly, but of driving collaboration together for a shared set of priorities?
Yes, I don't think I'll have like a silver, bullet here, like here's the recipe. It's a bit of an art and a science, I guess, like most people know. As was said, it starts with the objectives, and if you just go to the public, let's just focus on public and PE, or private equity. The public will be focused on jobs, resiliency, and sovereign requirements. The private equity folks will be focused on returns and speed, put very grossly, right? So I think you got to start there. Then when you think about, I can tell you the story about what happened in France, for instance, which was basically led on a government-to-government relationship. This was starting basically at the presidential level. We want to support the build-out of the AI ecosystem in France. We think we can bring value to you guys. You guys want to bring us on board. And then it started trickling down from there. I think we ended up with some sort of template, some sort of blueprint of how to approach these things. And you have to go a little bit beyond the obvious, beyond compliance. So beyond things like, water, reuse of the heat, the things that affect you've got to go a bit beyond that. You've got to invest, for example, in upskilling. We are investing in upskilling and education on the campus. I don't know if we're going to get a direct return on that money, but we are investing on that. You've got to, think those, even things like aesthetics, right? So how's the building going to look like? I mean, if you guys are probably involved in building these things, I can't tell you how much that mattered in the French context, right? How much local enterprise, local LLMs, local folks are you bringing, and what's the right ratio between, at the end of the day, 80% of the demand is the US. It's the US hyperscaler world. It's the US technology company. So you've got to figure out what's the right balance and bring people along. So you start with the objectives. You then, I think, gradually develop a blueprint of how to approach the public-private type of interests. We've learned a lot along the way, and after the French project was announced, which, by the way, it's a 1.4 gigawatt utility power outside of Paris. It's 40 minutes outside of Paris. We got approached by a lot of other European governments, and we're, of course, working with the US. It's where most of our investment and focus is in the US, but we got approached by a lot of European governments. What I'd say about that, with different ideas, different levels of maturity, is maybe to one thing that Raj says. For us, it often starts with the demand. And how can governments help? Well, you can help in two ways, right? There's the demand that maybe you as a government have in terms of your own sovereign needs. And then there's the other side, which is coalescing and bringing together industrial demand, right? So in some countries, it's the pharmaceutical sector. it has a relatively big demand. In some other countries, it might be the manufacturing and industrial and robotics sector and things that are bubbling up there. So the government can help, bring that type of industrial demand together, as well as anchor projects with their own demand. It doesn't have to be 100% anchored and, as a private equity investor, okay, I'm taking no commercial risk. That's the nirvana. But at least there has to be some anchoring, right? I think that's where we feel a lot of help. And I think from the private sector, we are willing to go in that blueprint to put money to work and invest over and above what is simply complying with what's just being a good citizen. We're happy to go beyond that. So I don't know if that answers, but...
No, that's excellent. I think, look, it gives a great perspective, which is you're thinking about the priorities and the needs of the communities that we're in, of ultimately those end users. And I think, Mohammed, that's a good point. It's not only thinking about them from a demand or a consumption view, but how are we positively impacting the labor locally, the education locally, the infrastructure locally, as your examples in France. Mohammed, maybe you could share some things about your experiences overseas and what you're seeing as far as critical priorities with governments and how you're aligning priorities between public and private.
I think back to the same point, which is we need to see what actually government, and as you exactly said, that the government would look for the labor market and the education, and they have verticals that each government need to have, maybe agriculture or manufacturing. So each government have a focus, and accordingly we should come in and we decide which vertical we will benefit, and then we continue the ecosystem completely. So it comes with the application, which maybe Raj might add on that, on how they identified which sector they can benefit, and they show to the government how this sector could evolve with the support of AI, and then comes to, we created the demand, which is the most important thing. So we have, and towards the end, the government, in this case, is the enterprise customer that needs a workload to serve certain sector or certain vertical. And then we started to see how the elements, which is the power and the connectivity and the land, and then the global connectivity, and each part, then the partnership will come here, that is each element will be addressed by specialized investors and in this sector. So subsea cables is one element in the equation. So either to serve connectivity towards data center, which is outside the country, or if the data center was in the country and you build a business case based on using this data center to serve multiple countries, you need to have the connectivity towards the end. So at this point, a different player will come, which is connectivity. The need here for government is to facilitate the connectivity towards the data centers, and also to create the ecosystem which will provide a competitive advantage to the builder of the data centers, that is, they will be connected. Otherwise, you will find a built data centers which is underutilized because of the absence of connectivity. So this is one element, but it starts always from the demand, which need to be identified. And I think a lot of efforts done on that side. I see this globally. But one thing is needed to look into emerging markets compared to developed markets, because emerging markets have different views and different needs and different infrastructure, which will need to be looked differently from the perspective of what actually the priorities for them. We cannot say that as a whole global have the same priorities. Right. So emerging market is different, and their challenges are different compared to developed ones.
That's such a good point. Nobina, you and I have talked about this in the past, about how AI and our responsibility to bridge the AI divide, right, and what this does for emerging markets and our obligation and responsibilities. I know you're deep in a lot of those emerging markets. Maybe could you share some insights into where you see the involvement of government, of these public entities in driving and shaping standards, particularly in emerging markets, and how we elevate, or how we should be looking at that in terms of creating better lives, better environments, better countries, better from a global perspective?
Absolutely. I would say a couple of things. One is having these partnerships between various governments and then the private sector in emerging markets is going to lead to the development of more sustainable infrastructure. And that's something that's very important for us. All of our data center projects globally, we're encouraging all of our operators, our partners to develop sustainable infrastructure. We're offering some sort of combination of certification through our EDGE certification capabilities, as well as financial or non-financial incentives, right? So that's going to definitely be one way that we'll see the more, developing and pushing this sort of focus in emerging markets. So that should be one of the implications. I will say that, these partnerships, we're expecting that it will attract more capital to emerging markets as well. And you're starting to see that, for example, in Latin America, in the Africa region, and particularly in Asia. There have been a number of large-scale projects that have been announced that are in the pipeline. About 3 weeks ago, I was in India for a week. I visited data centers in Chennai, visited data centers in Mumbai, then traveled to Malaysia and Johor and visited the Yonder project there. So there's significant capital that is now being deployed in emerging markets. And these partnerships, whether it's from sovereign wealth funds, private equity firms, and the hyperscalers themselves, will drive the development of this space in emerging markets globally. So that is one thing I will say. In addition, I will add that there will be more sort of cross-country or cross-regional collaboration as these partnerships are being developed. And so, for example, in the Middle East, the Middle East has become much more proactive about investing and developing AI infrastructure now. And as different global players, different hyperscalers will use that infrastructure, there will be a need to explore how to standardize certain regulations across markets. And so if customers from North America or potentially other regions, Africa, Asia, are looking to invest in the Middle East, there will be questions around regulatory issues and how are those regulatory issues standardized for new customers coming into the region. So I think that's going to be one area of opportunity, finding ways to provide clarity around regulatory uncertainty, because that's one of the key variables that makes markets attractive for investments in AI infrastructure.
Gentlemen, we are already 2 minutes up. We're going to do a speed round because I would love for you guys to look out 5 years and share your perspective of where you think we have the greatest untapped opportunities for really driving partnership-driven or collaboration-driven innovation in all we're doing to support AI, infrastructure, and users, all of that. But look out 5 years and maybe tell the audience here what you think the greatest untapped opportunities are through partnerships. Raj, would you start us off?
Sure. So we're moved from perception AI to generative AI, and we're in the agentic AI phase. And today we are building or focused on large language models, text-based models, visual models, multimodal models, all of these agents working together to make everyone productive. Fairly quickly, we're going to be entering the age of physical AI. That's robots working together for smart manufacturing and helping us even be more productive. The populations are not increasing around the world. In fact, in many countries, it's decelerating. So having agents or robots to help is going to help us sort of be more productive. But also, more importantly, as AI moves from a horizontal space to more of the vertical space, which is healthcare, retail, public sector, you're going to see new and new applications in this space, whether it's drug discovery, genomics, whether it's fraud detection in financial services, whether it's other finding and neutralizing bad actors, whatever that use case is, we're going to continue seeing use case-based AI taking off in the next 5 years. And by the way, this is going to be a phenomenal opportunity for all of us. So I want to make sure the last thing I do say is generative AI is here to stay. We're so excited to work with all of you. We're so excited to build a robust ecosystem with all of you. And put a shameless plug for our PTC'DC that's happening in October. Jensen is keynoting. I said a few things. He's going to say many, many things there. Great place to come out there and learn. It's already sold out, is what I hear, from a partnership opportunity, but it's right here in DC, last week of October. So please take the time to join us there.
Thank you. That sounds fantastic. I'm sure we will all come and join that. Obina.
Yes, thanks, Lynn. I would just add, to Raj's point that I think one of the, opportunities that we're going to see 5 years from now is there will be a lot more, regional hubs that we'll see in terms of AI infrastructure. Mark and Bill, spoke about the U.S. and China. These are sort of the two key AI hubs today, but in the Middle East is now positioning itself as sort of a new sort of third hub. And then over time, we would expect to see some additional new hubs, for example, in Asia. Malaysia, Johor is positioning itself as a hub. In LATAM, Brazil is also positioning itself as a hub in the LATAM region. Eventually in Africa, South Africa is essentially positioning itself as well. So we would expect to see over the next 5 years an increase of more of these sort of regional hubs. And these hubs will be areas they will attract innovation and across various sectors, whether it's healthcare, education, fintech, and they will leverage, the generative AI infrastructure that's being, developed by, people like NVIDIA. So this is something that we're expecting to see, and we're expecting that in emerging markets there will be big beneficiaries of these types of trends.
Excellent. So far we've heard transformative enterprise use cases across the board, strong collaboration, regional hubs for driving even more agility, innovation. Ignacio.
Yeah, I will answer it from the point of view of infrastructure, since that's what I co-head at MGX. I'll leave aside disruption in the end of the spectrum, because I think there is disruption, whether it's non-transformer based models, there's a host of things there. But from an infrastructure point of view, I question the self-perform programs of hyperscalers. I think they're a bit of a dinosaur kind of approach, but I also understand that they have their own internal politics and they're navigating through it. But that's an area that, for me, is a big question mark, whether they'll continue to self-perform or that's not realistic, given where these facilities have been built and the way they're being built. The other one I'd say is, I don't think anybody's cracked the integration, or some people want to create an asset class of the integration of the data center infrastructure, the chip, and the compute. Mm-hmm. If somebody comes up with a solution around that, to finance it, to build it, to monetize it, commercialize it, maybe they hit the jackpot. Mm. Maybe the solution isn't to integrate it. Maybe the solution is to sort of approach it in a different... But I think there's something there. There's a big opportunity that nobody's figured out yet. Mm.
By the way, energy. I would think that integration of energy also is a significant element in that from an asset class as we look at it. Excellent point. And Mohammed, would you bring us to close? Give us your thoughts.
I was having a discussion with Chris Benezi yesterday, and I think we came to a point where the agent-to-agent, if it's evolving, will need to see a lot of global. The regional hubs that Obina was talking about will be part of an ecosystem where the agents will need to be connected together, which will address regulatory points about sharing data between those agents. And at the same time, how this interconnection will happen, we will create another peering points like we used to in the IP domain, to have a peering points globally where the agents will interconnect together, which is a new vertical for telco, to see if they would be the one leading on that interconnection point between agents. But this is something which could save on one side and create more innovation, because we will see less need for repeating things and repeating model and training for each exercise or use case. But we'll see integration between all those agents together, which will be something big in terms of global infrastructure. And at the same time, it will need a lot of alignments between different stakeholders about which layer we will interconnect, Will we do an IP layer? Would it be optical layer? Will it be have a new protocols for this interconnection between agents? I think this is something could be evolving and could be transformative.
AI agentic interconnects.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Everybody, we are well over time, so thank you for all of our, would you join me in thanking our wonderful panelists today? Thank you. Gentlemen, fantastic. Thank you for the time. We have one more session after this, so please stay put, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, and thanks to all of you.